You guys gotta get a new address with this street.
I thought about it and said, no.
Well, correct that. GPS trouble to see what it is.
Okay, we got lights.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the Special Districts Advisory Committee meeting. It is wonderful to see everybody in person. Some of you for the first time. Thank you to Acadia for hosting us today. Appreciate it. Maybe we get a tour of the facilities thereafter. Why don't we go ahead and start with the roll call.
Kimberly Thorner,
Present.
Jack Beebe,
Present.
Ann Baldridge,
Present.
Paul Bushy,
Here.
James Gordon, absent, Diane Hansen, absent, Tom Kennedy, absent, Al Lau, absent, Hector Martinez, absent, Marty Miller, absent, Mark Roback,
Here.
Joel City, absent, Mike Sims,
Here.
Oliver Smith,
Here.
Robert Thomas, absent, John Van Dorn.
Here.
There's 8 present. Four.
We do.
Just barely.
Oh, and I think we might have this.
Diane has entered the facility.
So we have 9.
So which is definitely.
It's okay. There's a seat here and right here.
All right, why don't we go ahead and start with the pledge of
Exactly.
allegiance? The flag is in the back of the
So
room.
look at parking up, down and open up for the buses.
Ready? Begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will go ahead and start with public comments. I saw that public comments were supposed to have been received prior to the meeting. Were any public comments received?
Sue, did you get any? Your
No.
email? I have not.
Okay. All right. And then we can start with, we normally do this at the end, but we can start with committee member reports. If any member of the committee wants to share anything that's going on at their home agency or in the region that they'd like to share with the group. Encouraged but not required. All right, then we will go right on. I think we're gonna go through this quickly. The next item, item 6A, is approval of the meeting minutes for December 17th, our last meeting. They are in your packet. I would be interested in a motion.
All motion approved.
Motion on Bushy, for a second.
I'll
All right, a second by Mr. Beebe. Any discussion on the minutes? And are we required to do a roll call, or can we just do aye now that we are in person?
I think we could just do I now that we're in person.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, we are good. All right, next we are on to item 6B, which is the review of the draft work plan and budget for fiscal year 22-23. This is not an action item. It is a presentation with a desire for discussion and feedback.
Yes, so first of all, hello, everyone. Keen Simons, Executive Officer. And I'll just take this opportunity to introduce LAFCO staff, because that certainly ties into the discussion of the LAFCO work plan and budget. So I'm going to ask, including our consultant, I'm going to just ask each one in a orderly fashion to introduce yourselves. Tell them something that you generally don't tell anyone about, just to get them there. No, just say your position, how long you've been with LAFCO. Go.
Just remember we're being broadcast live.
I love working at LAFCO.
My name is Priscilla Allen. I've been with LAFCO for about 1.5 years. My position is as an analyst, and I absolutely love LAFCO.
Great. Where did you grow up? I wanted to ask that.
So I was born and raised in San Diego, but I lived in Phoenix for 10 years and then moved back. So
Outstanding.
Eric Blum, executive assistant with LAFCO. In June, it'll be 7 years, and I grew up in Modesto, California.
My name is Stu New. I've been in LAFCO for, who knows, way too long. Over 15 years. Originally from East Coast, and can't wait to watch more March Madness after this.
So my name is Carol Ann Lehman. I go by Carol, and I've been with LAFCO since August as an intern, but as an analyst since November. And I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, but raised in the Coachella Valley.
Good afternoon, Adam Wilson. I'm currently serving as consultant to San Diego LAFCO. I've been doing that for just over a year now. I see a couple familiar faces in the room. You might know me previously. I worked 17 years for County Supervisor Diane Jacob doing her land use. So appreciate being the opportunity to make this transition and see the county and the regional issues from a different perspective from the outside, looking in rather than the other way. So outside of that, I am a native San Diegan, and if you want a fun fact, since it is baseball season, I was drafted by the New York Yankees out of high school. So I heard Julianne earlier mentioning wearing Yankees hat or at least her husband. So that's the fun fact of the day for me. So thanks for having us.
I am, my name is Tammy Luckett. I've been with LAFCO for 18 years, with the county overall 22 years. Mission clerk. I love LAFCO. Waiting till my daughter graduates from college, one more year. So that's it. So I can have more money.
And Tammy comes from the great
Oh, I'm
state.
sorry. Born in Ohio, but raised in Detroit, Michigan.
We ran into each other.
Ran
in
into each
airport.
other.
Oh, wow.
So is it the Buckeyes or the Wolverines?
Wolverines.
All right. Say that.
And
Even
just,
though my cousin played for Ohio State, Orlando Pace. But I can't.
former Ram.
Yeah, he was your cousin.
And then just to top it off, for those who remember last year, there was a piece in the Union Tribune about greatest moments in Jack Murphy Stadium. And our friend here, Adam Wilson, made it as a walk-off home run for what high school?
Mission Bay.
Mission Bay, as a beat some team for the, I assume,
It
local.
was one of the stadium's memorable moments, but yeah, my senior year in high school, hit the walk-off home run at Jack Murphy Stadium, as it was called back then. So I, 1996, and won the CIF championship, won the state championship for Mission Bay. Coach Hughes passed away with us and no longer with us. But yeah, that was the height of my baseball career. I did get drafted by the Yankees out of that. I did go play college, but kind of seemed downhill after that.
Was Matt Bush there when you were there?
No, Matt Bush was 2003
Oh.
or something. So I'm a little older than him, but he has quite the story as well.
Yeah.
So that is the LAFCO staff. And so this item, as Chair Thorner had mentioned, is a twofer, right? So this is the opportunity for us to present both our proposed work plan covering the upcoming fiscal year 23, but then also the budget that goes with it. Both items, which I think start on page 9, the agenda report is 9 of your tablets. So we brought these to the commission at their meeting on March 7th. They were tentatively approved. So right now we're going through a public review process. Part of that is to meet with you, and we'll be meeting at the end of the month with our city's advisory committee to make sure that you're aware of what's on our mind, and as either a group or as individual members representing your agencies, it's an opportunity to provide input all the way up until May 2nd, which is the date I assume we will bring final versions of these documents to our commission for formal approval. So with that, let's talk about the work plan. So the work plan, for the most part, continues on our path of recent years in focusing quite a bit of energy on our municipal service review work, We're still making our way in North County, although now that we've just gotten past the Fallbrook region, we are starting to pivot more purposefully westbound on State Route 78. Carol has a San Marcos region and Vista region document on the way to the commission soon. We'll bring that to you at the next meeting. And then hopefully by the latter part of next fiscal year, we'll be dealing with Oceanside and Carlsbad, maybe even a little Acadia, maybe.
We're moving to.
So one of the things that we have for you, and it's a visual, is in your packet, we have some highlights. In particular, the work plan itself is 30 projects. Now, realistically, we're not suggesting we're going to tackle all 30 projects in a 12-month period. So what we really are trying to do is make sure we get those top 10 projects. And then whatever else we can get is kind of a gravy, but nevertheless, it's our telegraphing tool to all of you to be aware of the things that are on the immediate horizon. So just with respect to the top 10 projects, we have our own, as I mentioned, municipal service review work that's continuing. We're going to continue some policy work. One thing that perhaps we can talk a little bit more about in the working group report that we or a report out that we have at the end of this agenda. You have a group of dedicated members who are helping LAFCO staff trying to come up with a good proposal, if you will, about this issue under 56133, which is this government code section we've been talking to you about over the last few years, about trying to reconcile through through the state legislative process what we think is a blind spot. My word is not necessarily shared by others in this room, but what we at LAFCO staff see as a blind spot where cities and districts like yourself come to LAFCO to request approval anytime they need to provide a service outside their boundary by contract. But within that section of law, it outlines certain exemptions. We assume that those exemptions are determined by LAFCO. We appreciate that's not a universally held belief, so we want to see about narrowing and drilling down that language through a legislative remedy. The working group has concluded, among other things, well, maybe it'd be a better way to tackle this through a local policy at LAFCO. And that way, things that are of specific circumstances and conditions in San Diego can be better reflected. So one of the top 10 projects we have listed in this work plan is a policy review on that very topic. Another high priority project that we have listed for the next fiscal year is figuring out a more systematic way of how we do community engagement in the service review. So Jack has just experienced what has turned out to be probably a year-long process on the service review. One of the things that I think some of our commissioners feel we could do a better job at is figuring out a way to engage the public and even the agencies in the early stages of these processes so that the input that we ultimately produce and provide back has some more connectivity. As many of you as general managers can appreciate, staff is inclined to just follow what the statute says, which is usually the minimum standards, right, in terms of who we have to notice and things of that nature. Our commission would like us to go a little further. And so one of the policy reviews that I'm sure we will look to this committee for feedback is how do we go about that? How do we go about engaging the affected agencies and your constituents in a more notional way?
I just made a note. I think your staff on that did a great job. Like I never felt that we weren't engaged in the process of the MSR. We saw graphs. We didn't agree on everything, but at least you took our feedback, and there were certain things you said, no, we see a difference. I mean, I feel like that part was as well done as it's been. Engaging the public. getting them interested in it, it's just gonna be hard. I mean, we try to get them engaged in what we're doing, and it's even more direct. It's just gonna be a hard process to say, hey, here's this document that generally describes what our agency does, come provide input. I think it's a great idea. I just see that as being a hard process to get people to show
Come
up.
get a free avocado or something.
Yeah, I think it's noble, but the practicality of that is probably.
And it may be using those agencies, board meetings or something, to set time to present on it. Hope people show up, but that's.
Yeah, all right. No, it's a good comment. And just, I'm vacillating a little bit now to our current study schedule, but these things do have an effect. So this year, 2 of our policy reviews were to create a translation in a translation policy where now we have clear thresholds when we automatically produce documents in, for the most part, in Spanish, but as we go to the southeast part of the county, other languages will get picked up. Another thing that we just had adopted that will affect the MSR is we have our own policy on environmental justice. And so actually, with Mr. Beebe's proposal that will be going to the commission at the next meeting about related power expansion, you'll see firsthand how we're trying to now quantify some factors when it comes to remedying or at least disclosing what could be considered an environmental impairment in the past, whether it be location to known sources of pollutants, things of this nature. But that is also going to be applied to MSRs that are going to come up. So what I see as the MSR or the policy on how we prepare MSRs is perhaps, as Jack said, maybe formalizing what we already do in practice. But then one thing that I know 1 or at least 2 commissioners are interested in is having some kind of middle committee that provides us more hands-on direction as we prepare these studies. I already feel Paul is getting nervous about that, and rightfully so, because as we hit the Carlsbad region.
Well, I'm just curious, what does the commission, what are they going at when they talk about environmental? That hits pretty broad in my mind. And for the most of us, we're, at least certainly the water and wastewater, we're so heavily regulated. We've talked about this in the past. I'm just curious what role LAFCO would have in terms of environmental protection.
It's not so much in that regulatory scheme. And I'm going to put Carol right on the spot since she helped do this report. Carol, how does LAFCO define environmental justice? If you can,
So environmental justice then.
yes.
Okay, we're talking
Just
about
the
pollution.
fair treatment of
Now, I was talking about having somebody assessing whether our facilities are protected. That's
No,
why
not
it's
that. But I may come in and
Environmental
say,
justice.
hey, I don't feel this is inclusionary enough.
So, yeah, that's fair.
Joking about that.
So, let's not, I didn't even want to invite you, but your staff.
LAFCO's decisions aren't enforceable. Anyway, so.
Well, Mr. Robeck, I don't know about that.
Well, what's going on in Monterey right now? They're rejecting Monterey's.
Well, we'll talk about that. Mark,
All right.
Mark is bringing up a provocative topic. But Chair, let me just reference, so there is 30 projects that we have listed in priority order. Our work plan guide, which is starting on page 13 of your packet, highlights the key ones that we think will actually be able to hit in fiscal year 23. But by all means, take a look at the actual listing on page 17 of the agenda packet. Many of them will directly or at least indirectly affect many of you here, whether it's a service review or for Ann and her friends among the resource conservation districts. We are continuing a policy that we flagged this year, but will take in more earnestly. Adam's going to help us with this, and that is convening kind of a working group among the RCDs to kind of address a lot of the issues that this committee flagged maybe a year ago when there were some boundary and service disputes among the 3 RCDs, resource conservation districts in San Diego County. And part of that is recognizing at LAFCO, we haven't always done a very good job of working with RCDs in explaining how our oversight works. And so as a result, there's been some grayness on the RCD's part of what they need to come to LAFCO for versus what they don't. And so that will be a process that may ultimately lead to a healthy discussion about consolidations, maybe functional, certainly. But if there's a will amongst the community, maybe even political, and just to zero down on this point, LAFCO is oriented anytime we do service reviews to look at opportunities for consolidations or shared resources. But I just want to make sure that this committee understands, certainly LAFCO staff believes that if a consolidation is going to work, it's got to be the idea and interest of the community itself. So sometimes you'll see in our reports comments saying, hey, agency X, Y, and Z should discuss a consolidation or shared resource. That's as far as we're going to go on something, flag a topic. Now, there may be outliers in the future where we see that there is an immediate need to move forward with a consolidation because there's some fundamental flaw with a service provider. That was the case a few years ago when we did the MSR in the Julian region, and it was deduced, hey, this fire protection district there is not going to be able to sustain itself, arguably had not been able to sustain itself at that point anyway. And that's where we took the unique recommendation and say, yeah, this needs to go forward. But generally speaking, we try to just telegraph thoughts for the general managers and the board directors to consider and leave it at that as we progress in our other activities of boundary oversight. So that's the work plan. Let me talk about how we're going to fund that work plan. So a little further into the packet, you see that we have generally a status quo budget proposed for the next fiscal year. That means certainly continuing to fund 8 full-time positions at LAFCO. Right now, we have 6 of those positions filled. 2 of them are vacant. Our budget is set to go up a little bit by about 4.1%, where we'd go from our operating or total expense costs at LAFCO of about $1,945,000 to $2,041,021. And again, most of that 4.1%, as we detail in the agenda report, is just taking the cost difference of operating this fiscal year into next. We are replenishing some accounts that we purposely squeezed a little bit over the last few years as a result of the pandemic. But by and large, the increases are all going towards service supplies. I think we have a very healthy labor to non-labor split at LAFCO, about 63 to 38 if the math works there. I'm sure Paul can help me on that.
Number 1.
And I think our goal has, at least staff has been to certainly make sure that our staffing costs stay below 70% of whatever our overall budget is. And so I think when I came here, we were at 66. So I think we're going in the right direction to make sure we have some flexibility. And part of that is to make sure we have the ability to bring in people like Adam and other consultants, whether it be Ryan Brady, Steve Abbott, to help round out our expertise. So there is a bit of an anomaly in looking at what we propose our budget to be versus what we propose our agency apportionments to be. And of course, all of you here represent agencies that fund into LAFCO. So in one of the pages, you'll see a graphic where while our operating costs are going up 4.1%, our apportionments are set to go up by 6.3%. Now, why is that? Well, that is because we are reducing the amount of non-operating reserves that we would be using as revenues going into next year. So this year we budgeted about $78,000, maybe $80,000 in the use of reserves. Next year, I think we're projected to be in the $50,000 range. So that helps to explain why we're asking a little more money from our funding agencies, again at 6.3%, although well below the inflation rate for San Diego County, which I think is around 8%. Yes, Chair.
What is the formula for the apportionment amongst the agencies? Because I'm looking at the water agencies, they're not in rank order of volume, they're not in rank order of property. So what's the underlying formula?
So the underlying formula is revenue. So based on the most recently completed fiscal year as determined by the auditor, and typically maybe it's 2 years delayed, they look at your revenue totals and they match you up. And so typically OTI has the highest revenue total among all 70 or so independent special districts. Whereas, Mission Resource Conservation will, get a bill for us for literally 30 cents. So there's some formula in that code. Now, the law specifies what the overall category formula is. So the county pays 28%. The special districts among you collectively pay 28%. The cities, less City of San Diego, pay 28%. And then the City of San Diego, which always is guaranteed a seat on LAFCO by way of special legislation, pays 14%.
Are you gonna do that table? Or did you already present that to the commission that just breaks down the different?
So Tammy will work with the auditor's office once we finalize this number, and then you'll get a table that specifies what your number will be.
Perfect. Yeah, we're just going through our budget too, so.
So that's the budget. That's the work plan. Any questions about what LAFCO has on its mind going into fiscal year 23?
Question, Keith.
Yeah.
That's 63% personnel.
Yeah.
Percentage voted. Does that include those two positions?
Yes.
That I filled?
And it also includes, we have a placeholder of a cost of living adjustment of 5%. And just for the benefit of being clear, so we follow whatever the Board of Supervisors does. They're negotiating. Word on the street is it might be 3% or so, but that gives us enough wiggle room in case I need a raise, which has always been an important discussion point for me and others.
It's the only time we call in.
Yeah. So overall, relative to most LAFCOs, I think we're a pretty lean machine. Nevertheless, you have a month or so to take these items back to your respective special districts. Perhaps what me and Tammy can do in the interim is produce a draft version of what the bill would be for individual agencies. And again, while the overall amount is going up 6.3%, some of you might actually see a decrease. Some of it might be a little higher if you had a really good, year in the last year or two. But that's the budget and work plan process. So with that, Chair, one question here.
So you were talking about the breakdown for all the different agencies, City of San Diego, et cetera. Now, the Water Authority, correct me if I'm wrong, board members around the Water Authority, isn't the City of San Diego like 40%?
Yeah, well, that's totally different basis. So that's based on.
This is like 14%. It seems like as a total of the budget, the city should be far higher, no?
Well, it's again determined by the legislature, and it's unique for San Diego and just a few other counties in California have designated seats for a large city. So Sacramento, Santa Clara, LA, and San Diego are the outliers. The other LAFCOs don't make this distinction.
But isn't that a percentage of the budget you were saying?
It's a percentage of the budget for the other 17 cities.
Oh, rather than the overall.
Yes.
OTI would have to sponsor a bill to the state legislature and increase the city's.
Does the water authority Does the water authority get an apportionment?
They would if they did not have special legislation when they were created that exempted themselves from that process. The same goes for the Metropolitan Water District, which is the LAFCO special district, but again, they have a carve out.
But if I'm reading page 15, City of San Diego is over $250,000 off the top, and all the districts combined are about $500,000. Is
That's
that
probably true, yeah. Because again, you're paying 28% of the LAFCO budget, they pay 14%.
What page is that on the? PDF? Oh,
It
it's-
is 15 of the
But
packet.
Keep in mind, you get 2 votes at LAFCO. The City of San Diego gets only 1 vote.
Yeah, I was just gonna note, big picture when you look at it, the fact that, LAFCO's held labor and benefits flat over the last 3 years, especially the coming year, it's pretty tough to do. I don't think most of us that are doing our budgets right now are seeing sort of flat labor and benefits. So I just think, overall, it looks like it's a good budget. I don't see an issue with that. So.
Wonderful. So sounds like everyone's pretty content. So I will pass that on to the commission. So don't even worry about, submitting a letter. I'll just say nothing but a love fest.
No, we're saving that for your email.
Thank you. All right, so Chair, again, with the invitation for members to individually go back to Lucadia, Palomar, what have you, for agency comments, we're good with this item.
And I would just state my concurrence, the 56133, the self-exemptions in Goal 4. I think we have to address those, and I like it that they're high priorities. It seems like they come up anytime any of us have a dispute. One or the other one is an issue. So I thank you for putting those as high priorities. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? All right. With that, we are now on to item 6B, which is an update on the ad hoc advisory committee for Fallbrook and Rainbow reorganization proposals.
Chair, so I'm going to ask, and I know Chair Thorner has her own point of view as one of the at-large members, but I'm going to ask Adam Wilson, who's been ably moderating and our contact person on this process, give the committee an update, and then if there's questions, observations, we'd love to hear the feedback.
Thanks, King. I'll just do a quick table setting here. So subsequent to Rainbow and Fallbrook's submittal of their applications to LAFCO in June of 2020, an ad hoc committee was created to assist LAFCO in the administrative review of those applications. I was brought in as moderator in January 2021, and the committee to date has met nearly a dozen times. And during the onset of this formation of the committee decided that hiring an independent water expert would assist in the merits and demerits of the proposals. And water economist Dr. Michael Hanneman was hired. He was tasked to study 3 interrelated issues related to water reliability, financial impacts, and any sort of potential exit or departure fee. His draft report was issued in September 2021, and it was final in January of this year. After such, February of this year, he presented his final report to the ad hoc committee, and each committee member was individually asked to go on record and conclude if he fulfilled his duties and responsibilities, if the 3 issues were fully addressed, and if the report would assist LAFCO in making future informed decisions. And that committee unanimously conceded yes. So to those points, I'll kind of just quickly highlight a very 30,000-foot level overview of his findings. In relation to water reliability, he concluded that the County Water Authority was a bit more reliable than Eastern, as they have a bit more local supply and have positioned themselves with a higher priority of Colorado River water, known as QSA. With respect to the financial impacts, he concluded that Rainbow and Fallbrook, should detachment occur, would receive a combined annual net savings of $7.7 million. And if the detachment would occur, that this County Water Authority would see an annual net reduction of their revenue in the $12 million range. With all that said, with respect to the potential exit or departure fee. He concluded that conditioning a fee of such would be fair and reasonable, economically justifiable. And he based that fee off the proportional shares of the grandfathered rights to that QSA water with the associated agencies. And so that number is about $13 million from an annual perspective. And he kind of narrowed down a window of time that fee should be paid within 3 years or 10 years. And to such, there's some subjectivity to that. So with that said, again, that's a very, very high level look at it all. I know most of this, if not all the subject agencies, would put a lot of caveats into that report and that information, and I'll leave it at that. Moving forward, there have been some members of the committee that have highlighted that additional issues should be raised for review from our ad hoc committee. Keenan and I are wrapping up that review. I suspect as early as next Monday, I'll get issued out some sort of informational email that will walk the committee through our next steps. But I will kind of preview it that it looks like that we, most importantly, will be looking at some sort of impacts to the city of San Diego, because there's a lot of talk between roll-off and detachment, what those impacts are from a regional perspective and so forth. And there's a whole other host of issues that have been brought to the table, and it will be up to the discretion of that ad hoc committee to decide whether or not there's merit to move forward in those discussions. So more to come on that, but that's my report. Appreciate the time. I'm here obviously to field any questions or comments.
I'd just like to know where QSA, the acronym, came from. I know you define it, but your definition doesn't have a Q anywhere in it. I
Wants a
wanted
bond settlement.
It's a quantification settlement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Legal term.
An agreement to settle who gets flood upon Colorado.
Okay.
Likewise, in the state of California.
Thank you.
Any questions on this by this committee?
I've got a question. So there is unanimity in his report, Jack?
No, there's unanimity in the fact that the report, Animan had done what he needed to do, and LAFCO had sufficient information between the report and our comments on the report. But that continuing to have the discussion in that forum, we're not getting any closer together. We're just arguing the same point.
So you're just trying to move
We
on.
just need to move on. That's essentially, we're
All right,
not
I
gonna
just, yeah.
continue to argue the point. We have a number of issues with certain things in the report. The water authority has a number of issues.
Remember when I looked at the report, it was the executive summary. Those of us that are familiar, we probably are, executive summary, page or two. I mean, it's 15, 18 pages. It's just the most convoluted thing I've ever read, That's my personal opinion. Not our agency's opinion.
But I think the consensus was the information's there for LAFCO at this point. LAFCO's got to take that information and come to some, determination in terms of what does the report say, what does the law say, or, what's the framework that's sort of left it as I understand it. And I think, I know sort of Baldwin Rainbow side, and David and Ken and sort of feel like that committee has sort of reached the end of its usefulness, which is just a forum to argue with each other. But there were still others that felt like it needed to continue for specific items. And we just offered up from the Rainbow side that if it's going to continue, then let's talk about some other issues, like what's the roll-off impact on Fallbrook and Rainbow if we stay. But we don't necessarily agree that we should continue to have discussions in that forum.
In respect to that, we're going to narrow down that scope greatly. And I think there is some merit to have some additional conversations, but we will narrow that down and respect the timelines here.
And if you hadn't taken a deep dive into the packet, at the very end, attachment 2 to this agenda item is a letter from the Water Authority stating the issues that they think should be further continued. And then the staff report discusses City of San Diego. I think brought it up at the last meeting, the discussion of the roll-off and what the difference between roll-off and detachment would be on the Water Authority and its rates and finances. So, so I'm looking forward to that email.
Yeah.
I did sign up for this committee thinking it was a shorter time.
Finite.
Finite, yeah, it has gone longer, but I also think it's a good thing to do things right, and get the commission the information they need. Mark, to your question, I don't think everybody agreed with everything in the Hanneman report, but I think everyone agreed that he did his job and he
Yeah,
answered.
and
the
I just want some clarity on that, because I got the impression there was a lot of,
Yeah,
you
he
know.
answered the questions that he was tasked with, and everyone can follow how he got to, and he explained how he got to. But if you look, he's done a great job. I'm assuming, Tim, that the volume of records and information that's been provided, it's very transparent on the LAFCO website to find where he got to, what he got to at the end.
So the question for LAFCO staff, now that that's been done, does the LAFCO staff make an analysis fully separate of the Hanneman report?
No. So the Hammond report certainly is going to inform the LAFCO staff recommendation in form. There are other analyses that needs to occur, but on 3 significant topics: water reliability, rate impacts, and a potential exit fee. The report now gives LAFCO our numbers, right? Subject agency all have their numbers. This document, which I think is a very good report, tells everyone right now what our number range is. And so it's beginning to manage expectations for everyone's benefit of what is coming down the road, so to speak.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one related follow-up comment in that, and it's almost, maybe Chair, it's a question. So certainly the role of the Special Districts Advisory Committee by way of policy is to help inform commission discussions and actions that have a specific impact on special districts. And that includes being the venue to help address disputes among service providers. Now, the commission took a decision to create this ad hoc group really for that purpose in mind, to address some of the disputes around technical issues for the most part. So absent the committee telling me otherwise, it's my expectation that we will present a staff report to this committee with our complete or near complete recommendations to the commission, perhaps at your quarterly meeting in September or October. And then you would be welcome and encouraged to provide committee comments on that. If there was another role that the committee would like to have, or have a more prescribed role, then tell staff sooner than later. Because we're balancing this with not only how we interact with you, but how we'll interact with our city advisory committee. And I'm admittedly, and with the exception of a few of us, Tammy and Dune and Erica, the rest of us haven't been with the committee long or worked with the committee long enough to know how you've dealt with other controversial projects. So I would benefit from understanding your expectation, and perhaps if there's a disconnect, and I'm not saying there is, we can reconcile before the day comes.
The controversy in the past on this committee, I'm thinking back. Yeah, Fall Work and Rainbow. But also there was a Ramona MSR that got sticky a few, and the committee itself came up with recommendations, and the chair went and provided testimony at the LAFCO hearing as to what the committee's recommendations were. In one instance, they were regarded, the other they were disregarded, obviously, and which is their discretion. The concern I have about this committee taking more prescribed role versus in comments is that so many of us are self-interested. 2 of the proponents are on this committee. Many of us serve in water district roles that will have a benefit or not, depending on the outcome. And so comments and discussion, this is my personal, but prescribed role where we take some kind of action or have some type of change to the document. Unless people are willing to exclude themselves from the conversation, that's pretty much half this committee would have to exclude themselves from it. I remember when this first went to LAFCO, and I think it was Supervisor Jacob that said, go through this process and have this subcommittee, but her hope was that it would get closer and the groups might get closer throughout the time period. And I guess in my mind, I'd like to see a little bit more attention on that. Is there potential to resolve it? If not, just moving it forward and sending it to LAFCO.
So what happened on Fallbrook Rainbow 1.0? Was there people who stepped aside for that?
Yes, actually, somebody was not allowed to participate. Was it Tom? I think,
I
Brian.
don't think Tom was on the committee at that time.
Yeah, so what, was it Brian Brady? Somebody was on the committee.
Brady wasn't.
And Brady had to exclude himself from the discussions.
And just from my perspective, I think I can speak for Tom, but I think I can find it. Neither of us were involved. If we're taking till September anyway, which I guess, there's a pretty long time period in there. I don't see why it would hurt, even though, yeah, there are financial impacts which are negative to some of the other agencies. I still think their opinion on it would help LAFCO staff potentially sort of understand some of the nuances on this issue. So I don't have a problem, with members of this commission that are involved in water being involved in helping shape how the final report goes out, understanding what that really means. I think that's better than it coming out and then others saying, well, wait a second, you didn't think about X, Y, and Z. I mean, I think that's why we're here. So, I mean, all of us are sort of indirectly affected by a lot of things. So I'm okay with that. I would rather not extend things out, but it seems like there's time with the way the schedule's going anyway. So,
This group is just advisory. We can't take votes as a body, but it is just advisory.
Using Mark's terminology, so on Fallbrook 1.0, did this committee, for those who are here, make a recommendation on the proposal itself?
Yes, and I still have.
Okay.
Yes, in my office, and we actually recommended that it happen.
yeah, and quite honestly, I don't see how. And I don't mean this in the way it's going to sound, and it has nothing to do with Alexander, but I don't see how it could be any less productive in getting to a agreed upon position in this group than it has been in terms of our ad hoc committee, in terms of trying to get the parties to agree on anything. I mean, I don't think that's, the same sides keep saying the same things, even though we're sort of at the end, largely.
I would offer up just as an observer. So again, I've been observing the ad hoc. Adam's been staffing it. It does seem that there is movement towards middle ground in terms of talking the same baseline information now. So I do see that the ad hoc has produced movement in a positive direction where there's this 3 to 10 year window. There's this cost number of 13 million as a potential exit fee number on an annual basis. So yeah, the two subject agency sides are still opposite on where those numbers should be, but I think the ad hoc has been successful in creating parameters that did not exist before.
It's true, but for the committee for today, this is just an information item. Until the committee actually sees some sort of direction that the LAFCO staff is trying to take, there's really not a lot that we can do other than to nod and ask a question about the report. So it's been fully vetted. So from that standpoint, I guess if we see the recommendations come out, then we can actually have something to think about and decide whether we have input as a group into this.
Yep. So I would then suggest September, which is your next meeting, will be that opportunity.
So your plan is just basically to develop the thing and then provide it to this committee, but not engage anyone in the committee along the way? How
Well,
will you develop it?
just based on this feedback, I heard that the interest was to get some recommendations to then respond to.
You're basically saying then you'll have the final, you'll basically say, this is what we're gonna take to the.
We're a draft recommendation, but I mean, just in terms of input from this committee, for the very point that both you guys mentioned was that there's winners and losers in this one, and until you can kind of get a sense of what direction it's heading in, it's really difficult to comment on.
And keep in mind, so the ad hoc was set up to advise LAFCO staff. You are set up to advise the commission. So there can be, although I will certainly file away any divergent recommendations from this group. You certainly
As you
are set
usually
up to, say, hey, this is our thought. So this is a check in the process.
So my perspective on this, as long as I've been on this committee here, which is, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, the impression I've always gotten is in terms of water, wastewater issues, it's the special districts committee that has the expertise on it, whereas the regular LAFCO commission does not. And that's why it's important for us to give that kind of feedback. So I don't see how we'd be excluded from that feedback to get to LAFCO. Right?
Certainly.
Except
And
for
again,
maybe
keep in
someone
mind,
that had
the feedback
direct, you
though
know,
is to
impact.
the commission.
Right.
What I'm asking is, would you like to, participate in the staff process of developing our report and, having an extra meeting for us to explain, here's our thinking, and to then have some input before a staff recommendation comes out. I don't know how that worked with Fallbrook, if you were presented a EO report and you reacted to it, or you participated in some of that discussion. I'm saying I'm open to either.
I would definitely be up for what you said is like a preliminary meeting when you start to, vet some of the thoughts from the advisory committee, kind of where you think it might be going. And if you're looking for input on that is absolutely something we can look at.
Last time with Fallbrook and Rainbow went so far as we saw the draft, and then we had several meetings, and at one of the meetings, the general managers and general counsels from each of the parties actually presented to this advisory committee. And then we had a subsequent meeting, I believe, where we actually took a position and then provided testimony. I'm not saying that's how we, should do it, but there was a significant level of thoughtfulness that went into the recommendation that the merger should happen.
My only input on this is that as long as we don't come up with something that drags us out another, it's already been, 2 years. So do something. As long
Well,
as
but
they
there
have-
has been a pandemic, just to
I know,
give
but
staff
as
a
long
little-
as they go in parallel, that would be my concern, is that we don't do that preliminary in September and then.
So, I think there's equal comments going on both sides. So if the group's okay, I will just simply defer to the chair's determination on this topic as the date approaches about if we have a special meeting ahead of that September to, I don't know if I'd call it preliminary staff report, but maybe, an update on, where staff's thinking is. And I'm guessing by that point, we will have some definitive thoughts about what we think is an appropriate comment on exit fees, if an exit fee is appropriate and how much, and then be under that line of sight, then take comments to see if you agree with the reasonableness of our assumptions.
I would be supportive of a special meeting, but I also realize the bulk of this work, right? And so I'll probably need to be in contact with you to determine when it's feasible and that we can have that meeting, because I'm seeing a lot of nods around the room.
So maybe our September quarterly meeting would be the meeting we bring the discussion, and then you'd have another meeting in October where you would, if you choose, to make a recommendation to the commission.
When is the commission meeting?
The commission would likely, and I know this is a point of some contention, but nevertheless, Mr. Beebe, we're hoping to meet or have this item brought as a public hearing as early as November.
So what's your staff timeline to get kind of your thoughts together? We've got the input, there's probably a couple more items. You know, is your timeline, hey, we're gonna have this done June, July? Or
Well, the
September
big
is the
lift,
earliest?
and Adam mentioned this for us right now, is we would like, and it's in the staff report as well, but we would like to drill down on the city of San Diego and perhaps another like UEMA and have 2 case studies where we can say, here are the impacts specific to end users within these 2 different communities. City of San Diego being the biggest customer, urban, versus UEMA, you know, an agricultural customer for the most part. And again, I'm not saying subject agencies are, you know, giving me high fives on this idea, but I'm saying that would make sense to me and staff in addressing what our chair has said definitively at the last meeting. I want to know what a number impact is.
So in terms of time, September would be the earliest then? We would go through that analysis?
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, City of San Diego is a large vehicle, and to get them to schedule meetings and for us to probably defer to them to first give them a shot at telling us what they think. The
No,
impact
I'm
is.
just, I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to get a timeline on what information that will be ready by. So,
That's the time.
all right.
Question, the issue that got brought up at the last ad hoc or the subcommittee about roll-off and detachment, is that going to be addressed in the September report? Is that something entirely different?
It will be addressed in the staff report that will make some iterations to you in September in terms of explaining how we see the difference and then using our City of San Diego and perhaps UEMA. And I'm not necessarily married to UEMA. I am somewhat married to the City of San Diego because I think that's an important example, but explaining perhaps, you know, how a roll-off independent of what Fallbrook and Rainbow would be doing, how those projections from those agencies, in particular the City of San Diego, would be affecting others, right? So our analysis through Hanneman contemplated what is the impact of the 12 million in water sales Fallbrook and Rainbow collectively give the water authority. What I think we'd like to do with the roll-off is, okay, what is a likely loss of revenue for water authority on a roll-off scenario for just City of San Diego? And what's that number? And I'm not saying I'll know what to do with those 2 numbers, but I could show the commission, well, if the world just stayed the same, here's the impact of the roll-off.
Just one note, it's kind of in the weeds, but UEMA's required to report not just their water use, but what their municipal water agencies use. So you might talk to Amy, their GM, before you use the numbers the water authority uses for UEMA, because it's not actually the water UEMA uses. Or you might pick someone else. That's just sort of a note.
It's complicated.
Okay. So with that, thank you, Adam, for the update. So I think we're good to go now on those set items.
Thank you. Thank you guys for the input. Working group reports, do we have any? I think you gave one already on
Yeah.
the 56133.
Yeah, so there's basically a consolidated working group that we've been having some meetings with members being Paul, Jack, Kim, and James Gordon, who's out on the open sea as we speak right now, and I may be missing one. Tom. And so the committee, through the chair, created a working group to tackle these 2 somewhat combined comments about this legislative fix or fixes that I mentioned earlier. One being on what we see as a blind spot where the law says, again, hey, cities or districts, if you want to provide services outside your boundary by contract, you can only do that through LAFCO approval less these exemptions, and the blind spot being, well, who decides if those exemptions apply? So that's one part of the working group's interest, to see if there's some legislative remedy that makes sense. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. The other one is a little more recent, and it involves, well, not recent, but it involves this policy of rule number 4 that we have. We call it rule number 4, where we try to create policy provisions on how we go about designating and updating special districts, service functions and classes, which is an increasingly relevant issue for us here in San Diego, because not only do special districts here have clear functions, whether it be water, wastewater, or fire, or healthcare, but then there are these classes, these subcomponents that LAFCO is tasked with, using your favorite word, regulating, in terms of where they can be provided. And so the classes is a little more of a tricky conversation, because I think, okay, functions, okay, water, that's a clear function. Well, what is a class of water? Well, under our existing policies, it's like, you know, ag and domestic or something. But then Paul Bushy brought us an item 2 years ago that created some grayness. Where does recycled water? Is that a class of water? Is that a class of wastewater? Or is that its own standalone function?
Minor clarification.
Yes.
The city of Carlsbad.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. But that highlighted this need to go into our policy and update this chart or this matrix, among other things, to create some clear broad stroke guides to all of you, saying these are the functions of possible services that you could provide depending on your principal act. And then within that, here are some notional classes of services that fall within that. And so just because she's new, let's pick on Diane Hansen's Palomar Healthcare District. So healthcare would definitely be a function, right? We get that. But then for LAFCO purposes, are there appropriate classes within that large function that we would want to make clear that you either are or are not providing? And so now, Diane, and this is just me going off the hip here, but you know, clinic services might be a class. And I'll leave it at that, because I just don't know enough about healthcare districts. I don't want to go any further, because I'm looking at the screen, I'm realizing.
It's like Diane's gonna be on the
But so the working group met maybe 3 weeks ago on this kind of a joint topic, and 2 things kind of came out of it. One was, despite best efforts, there's just a disconnect, I think, between what the working group membership sees and staff sees as the fix on a statewide legislative proposal. But then that brings me to, well, we all agreed maybe we could tackle this a different way, which is through a local policy. Because obviously, when we talk about a legislative fix, you know, trying to be either too specific or too broad gets us in trouble with others. So that was the conclusion on that part. We are still going to be working on rule number 4, the working group, and part of it was agreement. Let's put this in next year's work plan to denote we still want to work on this project. So that's my report out on behalf of the working group. But again, if any of the committee members want to join in.
Zach and Kim are smart. They went skiing.
I was skiing. Yeah, I was like.
Not in the same place.
No, that's accurate. We just kind of on the legislative remedy for the code. That was just a little extreme. So I think the compromise there was to head it down to the policy, so that was accurate. And rule 4, it was a Friday afternoon. Keem, artfully scheduled it at like 3 o'clock on a Friday. So by 4:30 we were all burnt out. So I think we kicked Will Ford down the road because as we started discussing it, we got into some of the issues where not everybody on the committee, I could talk to wastewater and Tom, and you folks can talk to water, but it would have been probably good to have, somebody from healthcare, because I'm not going to talk about the functions and classes of healthcare because I really don't know. So the other gentleman from Deer Springs, he had some perspective, but I don't know if did we schedule another meeting on that, or did we just decide, hey, let's look at this draft, let's come back to whenever the next meeting's scheduled.
Yeah, so the working group needs to schedule another meeting, and perhaps with Chair Thorner's blessing, maybe we could identify some specific categories and defer to those on this advisory committee that work in that particular field, like resource conservation, healthcare. Just because Ann's here, one of the things that also came up last year for us is, well, where does groundwater management fall? In fact, the Water Authority appropriately asked that about Fallbrook and Rainbow recently.
Okay.
And I nodded my head, affirmative. I said, I don't know, but we should look at that. So the working group, more to come, and I think working with the chair, perhaps we'll tap some of you to get your individual thoughts to help inform the process.
All right, any other questions? Before we go to adjournment, does anyone else want to bring anything up for the good of the order? Chris, I just want to thank you for everything that CSDA is doing, especially on funds available for special districts and the processes and low-income assistance. I appreciate all the time and effort you've been giving us.
So is Chris going to give a report?
I do have one quick.
Oh, good, good. All right, put you on the spot.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kim. So yeah, one thing, talking about funding. So as everyone knows, the president signed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act back in September. So all the agencies right now with that money are working on procedures, how to apply and how much money and those types of things. So CSDA, we hired a lobbying group in DC called the Ferguson Group. And what they are doing is we are soliciting ideas, basically any projects that you have you think could qualify. It's an easy form to fill out. That'll go straight to the Ferguson Group. And then they will evaluate, okay, this type of project would probably work best in this agency for this pot of money. So we're asking our districts to be doing that and getting involved in that. We are asking the counties to be aware that special districts may be asking counties for ARPA funds because counties do have the authority to transfer ARPA funds to special districts. Unfortunately, San Diego, we need to have a conversation with them. They think special districts got ARPA funds, and that is not true. We are uniquely excluded from the HEROES Act or the CARES Act and from the ARPA Act. The $100 million that came from the state was out of the state budget. That had nothing to do with ARPA funds. So I'm trying to schedule a call with the San Diego CAO to kind of explain that their letter has some inaccuracies, and they do have the ability to do that. I know the fire protection districts have gotten some, but as far as other types, I'm not aware of any other San Diego districts.
They know full well that other special districts did not.
Okay.
We went to them and said, hey, we're just representing fire districts. We didn't get any ARPA funds. It's supposed to go through the county to the districts. Here we are. They know.
Yeah, the letter did not say that. So anyway, we'll be working with the county on that. And then also, let's see what else as far as funds go. Earmark requests. I did have a great meeting with the Office of Congressman Mike Levin yesterday. I know, and I'm just going to use them as an example, but all members of Congress are probably doing the same thing. Basically, he is going to put in 10 earmarks, and he's going to send me the process on how to apply for those. I don't know what districts in the room fall in his congressional area, so Kim, we can talk about that. But if you want to know who your member of Congress is, who to talk to at that office, please let me know. I'll be happy to connect you with their office. And once I get that information on kind of the process of how to apply to the member of Congress for that earmark, I'll get that information and maybe I could share that out with you and with the districts here. So that's another opportunity. And then pro development, professional development, we have a couple events coming up where our Special District Leadership Academy is coming up here in San Diego, April 3rd through the 6th. It's going to be downtown San Diego. We have our Special District Leadership Days. That's going to be in Sacramento on May 17th and 18th. And then we have our GM Summit, which is going to be in Coronado, and that is going to be June 19th through the 21st. There are scholarships available for all three of those events through our Special District Leadership Foundation. So I have plenty of cards here. If anyone wants more information, let me know. Pretty easy to find. I'd be happy to help facilitate that and point in the right direction where you can apply for those grant scholarship opportunities. Let's say. So, and with that, I'll go back to the floor to Jared. Thank you.
Thank you. My agency did just write a letter to the county yesterday,
Okay.
asking for the funds and telling them that we did not get any. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll
Well,
see if that happens.
What did you request it for? If you don't mind me asking?
COVID is
yeah,
basically.
it's all COVID related.
All
It's all
COVID,
COVID.
additional, yeah, it's all COVID
For the
related.
Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act, Mark, that's more for new projects, those types of things, not COVID related.
One of the ones that we put in there was a project that had to get delayed because of COVID, and we saw an increase above and beyond the original estimate. And so we asked for a differential in there. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Yes.
A question for the water service providers. So there was at least discussion out loud when COVID and the shutdown occurred that, water bills would be not forgiven, but, we're not going to shut off your
We
water.
were prohibited from shutting off until this past January. And some of us did late fees, but we had, some agencies had millions. Some had hundreds of thousands of bills that weren't paid. There are programs out where you can actually participate. I think it's the LEWAP program where you can participate and you can get some of those forgiven directly to the ratepayers. But a lot of agencies still have unpaid bills. A lot of us entered into payment plans with the customers. That was actually a requirement of the bill, that you could do that with the ratepayers. But I don't believe anyone has been fully recompensed as an agency for the impacts that they saw during COVID, from folks not paying bills, the additional costs, all the additional technology. Jack?
Yeah, there is a state money that came in that didn't capture everything, but paid unpaid. You had a snapshot of time you got to submit, and you generally got it, but then you had people accruing late bills after that. They did then open it up for wastewater, so original water, then wastewater, you got to kind of get state funds, but then you still had a balance that didn't get paid for, and that was just to pay some of those bills. Like Kim said, that didn't cover other costs. Then there is the program going forward, which is the LIWAP, mile after light heat, which is sort of a assistance program for just low income ratepayers going forward. But there's still, most of us have some sort of balance that we're trying to work our way through right now with customers where there's still hundreds of thousands.
Can a water agency actually stop service to a property for non-payment?
Now we can't, but during the 2-year period, we could not, no matter
Because what
what.
if that caused like a public health, like fire? Like how would you then, how do you deal with all
If
that?
there's no water to their abode, it's not habitable.
There'd be water for fire.
But the fire, the sprinklers would be off, right?
Yeah, the problem we have is if you don't have a mechanism, then you just become sort of a free bank, right? If there becomes, that's what you sort of learned during COVID. If there's no consequence of not paying the water bill, then you end up with people that just decide not to pay the water bill for a water district. No, that means someone else is paying their water bill, right? Because it's all someone else's money. So that's,
Which is against Prop 26,
Right.
having another entities or person subsidized. But each agency does have different practices. During the 2 years of COVID, there were no shutoffs. Now shutoffs have started again. Late fees are a deterrent. Some agencies I know do flow restrictors. I think it's Valley Center who takes it down to just what's needed for Houston health and safety. Other agencies just shut off. And my agency being one of them that has done that in the past. But generally, the bills get paid if you shut the water off.
Or some agencies like ours, ultimately, after you go through the shutdown process, you can then also put it on the property tax roll.
We do
So
that.
a lot of us will essentially then ultimately move that balance, and then when the property transfers in, so the county's much more aggressive at getting their money than unpaid property tax. So that is a way also.
And we also have the ability to do payment plans. That was written into law, where previously that was not there. Anyone else have anything for the good of the order they want to mention? I will mention, I did get an email from Rob Thomas. He can no longer serve on this committee. He was with the Pomerado Cemetery District, unique that we had a cemetery district participant. So we'll be looking to.
Nothing bad happened.
He's rethinking his volunteering opportunities, yes. And so if anyone has any recommendations, I'm looking that we have 3 fire departments, a lot of water districts, a couple wastewater, resource conservation, healthcare. We only have one on healthcare and one on resource conservation, but we are balanced across the county, so that we used to not be, and so we are pretty spread out across the county. So if you have an idea or someone that might be interested, please let me know. I know and try to get someone appointed to fill the remaining term.
One healthcare district. Right? We have the healthcare before that? Or
Yes. Yes. All right. Anything else? With that, we are adjourned a couple minutes early.
And thank